Hey everyone, it's me Andy from the Commander's Brew. You know us, we're just we're the guys out here who are making some budget deck techs. A lot of fun, wild, off the wall types of brews. This one is based on a challenge that's happening right now in our Discord. It's called the Brudiclad Bowl. This is my deck that I brewed up for it, and I'm hopefully going to play with our patrons. This should be a lot of fun. Check it out. Right, so this is a very special episode of Commander's Brew. I should say this. This one is special because this week's deck is based on a challenge that is currently going on in our Discord with our patrons who are in there, and it's called the Brudiclad Bowl. Now, maybe some of you have heard of the fabled Atraxa Bowl that happened at GP Vegas. It was the last GP Vegas that Sean and I went to. Put on by Commander Cookout, in which I brewed up an Atraxa Legendary Helm of the Host deck. Sean helmed it in an epic game and was bitterly backstabbed in that game and ended up losing. But I mean,
by Ryan from CCO Podcast.
Ryan Panef, we know where you live. We never forget
Saskatchewan.
This. Yes, the province of Saskatchewan. We still talk. I mean, obviously, we still talk about it with those guys all the time. We still make jokes about it all the time. We never forget. But it was a lot of fun, and the gang in our Discord came up with the idea to do a similar thing, but we're using Brudiclad. It's just an absolute favorite amongst us. Budget / fun jank brewers. We love to use a Brudiclad because it's got such unique ability. So let's just start by reading Brudiclad.
The ceiling for shenanigans is off the charts for Brudiclad.
Absolutely, it is. So yeah, let's just take a second here and let's read Brudiclad, because we got to know where it is we're starting from here before we get going. So Sean, why don't you go ahead and read Brudiclad for us?
Sure. Brudiclad Telcore Engineer, 4 blue-red, legendary artifact creature artificer 4/4. Creature tokens you control have haste. And at the beginning, this is the key. At the beginning of combat on your turn, create a 2/1 blue mirror artifact creature token. Then you may choose a token you control, any token you control. If you do, each other token you control becomes a copy of that token. So obviously, you can make all your tokens 2/1 blue mirror. We can make a bunch of those, one of those every turn, and we can make them into a whole army. But the real fun becomes finding weird ways to make other things into tokens that aren't normally tokens, and then turn them all into the same thing. And then shenanigans. Like we don't have to make a million copies of a thing. We make a million like dumb treasures or dumb mirror or whatever. Then we make one like choice copyable token of some crazy artifact or creature. And then we instantaneously, at the beginning of combat, turn all of our tokens, all dozen of them, into that thing. And the shenanigans begin.
Absolutely. If you're not aware of it, I've started to stream more on my own personal Twitch page, but we're going to be putting some of the games, because we've been playing some Commander games on Tuesdays called Commander Night Live. We're going to be putting them some of them up on the Commander's Brew YouTube channel, so stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, I bring this up for 2 reasons. One, this is where the idea for this deck started, is when we were on stream and chatting with some of the gang from the Patreon. But also in one of those games, in the last game we played with Jason Alt, Ryan Green from Commander Social, and Jackie, our longtime listener, Jackie, I had a bunch of Thopters, and I had a Sharding Sphinx, and it was a token copy because of the red guy who taps and puts one from the graveyard, makes a token.
Ooh, is it Feldon?
Feldon, yes, that's right. So I had a Feldon copy of Sharding Sphinx, and then anyways, I managed to get Brudiclad out, and then 10 Thopters or whatever it was became Sharding Sphinxes. They all attacked Like they were able to
Wow.
remove like a couple of them, so it ended up that like 8 Sharding Sphinxes hit, and I made like 64 tokens or whatever, 64 blue Thopters from that. It was like that's wild, and that was just a pretty normal Brudiclad thing to have happen, right? Like,
Yeah, that sounds pretty like Felden. That's pretty normal for Brudiclad.
yeah, like there's nothing
we can do better.
We can do better than that. And so, in talking about decks and talking about brewing and all this stuff, I was talking about on stream about how like we could change planeswalkers into creatures and then have creatures with loyalty abilities and things like that. Originally started talking about Gideon because, he turns into a creature like every version of him. And then one of the listeners, one of the patrons, Dylan, he was like, this kind of sounds like it would be a good Brudiclad Bowl deck. And then bam, here we are. So that's the crux of this particular Brudiclad Bowl deck. We want to use Brudiclad to make as many copies as possible of planeswalker creatures so that they are no longer planeswalkers. And I'll get it. Okay, I guess I gotta explain the rule stuff here. So here's the thing: we're gonna get a planeswalker. We're gonna turn it into a creature. Then we have to try and copy that and make token copies of that creature so that we can then turn all of our other tokens like treasures and so on, 1/1s, 2/2s, all of those into that choice copied creature that also has loyalty abilities. Now here's the thing. Stay with me here, Sean. This is tough because this took we were talking about this deck for like a week because we couldn't figure out how to make a planeswalker copy of a copy of a planeswalker creature. So take Gideon for example. When you use his ability to turn him into a creature, like a 4/4 creature that's a human soldier or whatever, right? If you try to then use any kind of copy spell or even a clone or anything like that, it will enter the battlefield as a planeswalker. You're still a planeswalker and a creature. You have 0 loyalty, and that is a state-based thing that says, oh, this planeswalker has 0 loyalty, it dies. Doesn't matter that it's also a creature that's a 4/4. Because your original Gideon has loyalty counters on him, he's allowed to stick around as a 4/4 creature.
If a planeswalker ever loses all of their loyalty counters, they're gone.
They're gone no matter what. If that happens to a planeswalker. So we were really trying to figure this out, and we consulted with Judge Chat. We asked a bunch of different judges to clarify these rules for us. This is confirmed. Many folks popped into the Discord and were like, can this work? Can X spell work? Can this work? Blah blah blah. And it all came back to these types of rules about copying, these planeswalkers and stuff.
But don't they enter with loyalty counters? When you make a copy, it enters, and it planeswalkers enter with loyalty counters.
For whatever reason, when you do this, they don't. I don't. I personally just don't understand it either.
Yeah,
but again, multiple consulting, lots of asking, lots of clarifying, and all this type of stuff. And this is how it is. So here's what you have to do in order to make this work. Okay, first of all, forget about Gideon, because we need to be able to mutate these creatures, these planeswalker creatures, and because Gideon is a human, we cannot use him for mutation spells. Otherwise, we're adding a different layer on where we need to change his creature type, and that's honestly way too much. This deck is already way too much as it is. Anyways, so we have to use a couple other creatures, a couple other planeswalkers. I'll talk about them in detail in a sec, but they can turn into non-human creatures. Then we mutate on top of them so that now they are a creature. They're no longer a planeswalker. That's the key thing. They are not planeswalkers. So we mutate onto them. They're no longer a planeswalker. They are just a creature with loyalty abilities. And since loyalty abilities are just activated abilities, you can still activate them if it's just a creature that has them. This is
but they'll start with 0 loyalty.
Exactly. So, but we started out. Bam, we've mutated onto this planeswalker. Now we copy the planeswalker. Yes, exactly. This new creature that we've made is like a 4/4 dragon, let's say, with the 3 abilities, except that it's also like Gem Raiser, right? So it's Gem Raiser on the top with these 3 loyalty abilities. You're right, no loyalty on it to start, so you have to start using those plus ones. So really,
Sure.
we're making a deck here that's all about the plus ones or the zeros, which oddly enough make a lot of tokens, which is good for the deck. So this kind of this thing where it feeds itself and we get a lot of different things. We got some payoffs. Anyways, let's get into it. Now that we know what we're doing, and it is a lot, I understand. There's, we talked about what commanders could work here. And the best one turns out to be Sisay, Weatherlight Captain. Because, keeping it to as few colors as possible, it was a goal of mine. For the Planeswalkers, we needed teamer colors. Again, because Gideon's we don't need him. He's not good to us. He's dead to us. He's dead to everyone, I guess. So teamer colors are where we want to be. However, Sisay Weatherlight Captain gives us a unique ability. She allows us to splash, which is actually really nice because there are some nice white cards and a black card or two that we like to splash in this deck. And she gives us her key ability here, which is very important. So Sisay Weatherlight Captain is 2 and a white. She's a legendary human soldier. She's a 2/2. She gets +1/+1 for each color among other legendary permanents you control. And then she has the ability of pay Wooburg. Search your library for a legendary permanent card with converted mana cost less than Sisay's power. Put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So if we do this right, and we have a couple, maybe we have a Planeswalker or even another creature out before, they're legendary. All Planeswalkers are legendary. We can start her off at 3. If we're lucky, we can start her off at 4 power when we cast her. Then we activate her ability, and then we go get the other pieces of this puzzle that we have in our deck. So she really is a bit of a linchpin here. And, because she's got the 5 color, ability here, we need to put in these 5 color, mana sources. But luckily, it actually doesn't put that much of a drain on us to splash 2 colors, essentially, because we just use stuff like Command Tower now does it, right? And a lot of the other 5 color makers that we generally use in 3 and 4 color decks they're just already there. Slow fetches are really nice for this. What are I don't know what we would colloquially call them, but do you remember the lands that come into play tapped unless you have 2 basics? I think people were calling them the Tango lands or something like that for a while. Those cards are great because they, or even better, the new Snow Duels. They have both land types on them. Though in kind with the slow fetches, that's a budget fetch game. Yeah, it's pretty slow, but guess what? This whole deck is slow. You just want to fix yourself with the colors. So anyway, just speaking a little bit about the mana base there. So this is the ability. This is what we're going to do. She's going to be key to getting some of these pieces together. I have run this. I have goldfished this deck because Forge doesn't have mutate for some reason yet.
Okay.
Tough thing to program. A lot of ins, a lot of outs. I get it. It's an open source program. But I have goldfished this ability, and let me tell you, it's tough, but we can get there. We really can. So speaking of setting the scene, I've told you guys a lot about what we need in this deck and what it takes to do it. This is an absolutely insane plan that needs a lot of pieces, right? So that's the scene. That's what we're trying to do here. It's tough to talk about setting the scene when you need so many things, right? So that was basically it right there.
Well, I think you've given us a great summary of what this deck wants to do. I want to hear about the cards.
Yeah, let's do it. So what we're going to do is I just want to talk about some of the other Planeswalkers in the deck. I'll get to the key ones about that work with the combo in a second, but right now we want to, it's going to take us a while to get there. So we need stuff to protect our Planeswalkers that make them live. Very rarely are you going to be able to play Sarcon the Masterless as your first one. And actually, you don't even really want to play him as your first one. He's, by the way, one of the key guys. So Sean, why don't you just take a look and tell us some of the key Planeswalkers that are going to help us with the Brudiclad side of things, as well as our weird thing of us making them all into creatures.
Sure. So this is shaping up to be a bit of a Super Friends list.
A little bit, yeah.
Freyalise, Llanowar's Fury, 3 green. Freyalise starts with 3 loyalty. +2, create a 1/1 green elf, basically a Llanowar elf, taps for green. -2, destroy an artifact or an enchantment. -6, draw a card for each green creature you control. But a little bit of handling artifacts and some ramp. We like that. Garrick Wildspeaker, OG Garrick, 2 green, starts with 3 loyalty, +1 untap 2 target lands. I mean, you only end up paying 2 the turn you cast him because you get 2 of them back right away. -1, 3/3 beast token, -4 creatures you can. Oh, it's overrun. Creatures you control get +3/+3 and trample. Only starts 1 away from that overrun too, which is like they adjusted that. Usually you need 2 ups before you can ultimate. That seems to be pretty standard. How about Sarcon Unbroken? This is the teamer one, not the mono red one. 2 or the Rakdos one. 2 green, blue, red. Sarcon, 4 loyalty to start. +1, draw a card, then add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. -2, put a 4/4 dragon token with flying onto the battlefield. -8, that one's a mile away. Search your library for any number of dragon creature cards, put them onto the battlefield, then shuffle. I'm going to guess there aren't that many dragon creature tokens, so this is useless.
Yeah, we're not looking for the ultimate. The ultimate's a real pipe dream. There's one more there, too.
Ooh, Arlen Cord, 2 red-green. This is the flip planeswalker from Innistrad or Avacyn Restored. Well, one of those. Starts with 3 loyalty, +1 until end of turn, up to 1 target creature gets +2/+2, vigilance and haste. That's a great way to protect yourself with one of your creatures. Haste, specific, the vigilance specifically. Or 0, put a 2/2 green wolf token onto the battlefield and transform Arlen. So that's how you transform into the other side. So she'll have her 3 loyalty, and now she can +1. All your creatures get +1/+1 and trample till end of turn. -1. Arlen deals 3 damage to any target creature or to any target. Is it any target? Yeah, any target. And then you transform back into the first side. Or -6, you get an emblem that says creatures you control have haste and tap. This creature deals damage equal to its power to any target. That's pretty good.
Weird rules thing here. If you turn this into a creature and try and transform it, I just think it does nothing.
It does. That's right. I do know that cards that have like the card itself has 2 sides. So if you copy it in any way, that copy doesn't have another side. So it can't.
It simply can't do the transform. But you can still make 2/2 wolves with it. With her.
Yes. Yes. The transform will never happen.
Yeah, and that's the key part with these walkers. They get to protect themselves. We're also providing the fuel for Brudiclad to change all of these tokens eventually into some bigger, more impressive creature down the road. We also got Planeswalkers are also a main source of card advantage for us in this deck. Karn, Scion of Urza is in here, the 4 colorless legendary Planeswalker Karn, 5 loyalty starts, +1. You reveal the top 2, and an opponent chooses one of them. You put that card into your hand and exile the other with a silver counter on it. Then you can -1 and put a card you own with a silver counter on it from exile into your hand. And then -2, create a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token with this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. Those guys, if you can make one of those and start and change all of Brudiclad's tokens into those guys, things get real messy. So
yeah,
Karn is actually sneaky, really good at the token side of it, as well as providing a little card advantage with its +1 and -1 abilities. Also, we have Tezzeret Artifice Master, another good one for both sides. 3 blue, 5 loyalty walker, +1, create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. Is 0, which is really nice. Draw a card. If you control 3 or more artifacts, draw 2 cards instead. And then a -9 that we don't really need to worry too much about. It's about getting an emblem, where at the beginning of your end step, you search your library for a permanent card, put it onto the battlefield, shuffle your library. Not too concerned with that one. And one more. We have Vivian, Monsters Advocate, 3 green, 3 loyalty planeswalker. She has a static ability. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may cast creature spells from the top of your library. This is helpful with our mutate side of things, as she is the Ikoria Vivian here. +1, create a 3/3 green beast creature token. Put your choice of a vigilance counter, a reach counter, or a trample counter on it. Very fun way to give your planeswalker creatures another fun little ability because of the counters, right? And then -2, when you cast your next creature spell this turn, Search your library for a creature card with lesser converted mana cost put on the battlefield. Shuffle your library. That one's not as good, and like I said, it's a minus ability, so you probably won't use it all that often.
So can I check in?
Yeah.
These planeswalkers, we can't turn them into creatures. Like this only works with planeswalkers that can turn themselves into creatures somehow.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay, so the ones that make tokens, those tokens will become other planeswalkers. That's the notion.
That's our plan. Now there is a way that we can turn these other planeswalkers into creatures as well, which we're one step away from explaining that. Sean,
okay.
Before we do, just very briefly tell us about, some of the examples of the mutates we're using. We're using mutate creatures in the deck, and we're using basically a classic, bunch of good ones. We've got I think we have about like 15 in here because you really want one. In the deck. So yeah, go ahead, read these ones.
So mutate came out in Ikoria. You mutate onto a non-human creature, and then you stack the cards. You get to choose, does the card you're mutating go on top or on bottom? And the only difference is whatever card's on top is the card, but it just gets all the abilities of the thing that is underneath. This is the way to erase creature types on planeswalker creatures, right? Because we're going to put the mutates on top, so they will be, so for example, Gem Razor, 3 and a green, creature beast, but it mutates for 1 green. You mutate it onto an animated planeswalker, leave this on top. It has reach, trample, 4/4. Whenever this creature mutates, destroy target artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. That's great. This is a great planeswalker or a great mutate creature for any green deck, I think, in general. But the card has to go on top. Like you will never put it under the planeswalker. We don't want to copy legendaries. So that's one example.
That's right. That's
How about
a good point, by the way. That's another reason we're doing the mutate thing, is because we're getting around the legendary status of planeswalkers that way.
Yeah. Another way to Illuna, Apex of Wishes, 2 green, blue, red, mutates for 6 total. 6/6 flying trample. Whenever this creature mutates, exile cards from the top of your library until you hit a permanent and put that permanent onto the battlefield or into your hand, whichever you prefer. I mean, if you hit a land, whatever, but you might hit a planeswalker who just freely pops out of the battlefield. Yeah. That's pretty nice. And Parcel Beast. This mutates so cheap. 2 green, blue for a 2/4. But it only mutates for green blue, which is also Coiling Oracle's casting cost. And because it basically becomes activated Coiling Oracle. So now you can pay 1 tap, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land, you may put it onto the battlefield. If you don't, put it into your hand. That every turn you can Coiling Oracle or turn a planeswalker into a Parcel Beast.
Yeah, if you noticed that back at the planeswalker thing, section, I tried to keep the CMCs of the planeswalkers as low as possible. Now, in this deck, for the purposes of the challenge, there was no budget restriction, and we're playing with like either proxied or digital cards. So like, we're not worried about budget basically. So like, I was able to put like some of the cheap, like really expensive planeswalkers in, but for this version that we're talking about on the show today, like I did. Keep it to more of a budget because maybe someone wants to brew this deck in real life, so I want to be able to help in that way. It's a lot more like practical that way, right? So the walkers I included are like 4, and there are like a couple that are 3. I'll get to them in a second. There are 5. I try not to include too many 6s because you want to have a big turn with this deck. It's the type of thing where like it's all a little fragile, right? So Parcel Beast and the mutates are also ideally. I know Illuna's not, obviously, but like Parcel Beast is one of the best ones in the deck because it's just 2 mana, so you can cast a planeswalker, do the thing that we, do the thing where we change them into creatures and mutate in the same turn. That's like exactly what we want to try and do. So, I mean, this whole deck is just made up of them, but it's. I think it's time we start talking about the neat moves.
Working on a
neat moves. We're just going to take a second to handle a little bit of business. And the main point is, thanks for watching. If you want to see more of our comedic takes and offbeat decks, consider subscribing to our channel and hitting that bell to make sure you don't miss anything. And if you're loving our stuff and want to support further, the best way is to head over to patreon.com/commandersbrew. Find out how our generous patrons keep our show growing and how you can get in on the brewing action too through our Discord. Or, if you'd rather, just hang out and play some games with like-minded Commander players. Now, let's get back to those any-to moves.
I mean, it feels like we've already been talking all about neat moves so far, right?
Well, let's get to some specific cards then.
Let's get to some specific ones, and let's get to the big ones. These are the ones I saved them for the neat move section because they are the neatest moves of the whole thing. So, the planeswalkers, the ones that we want to get that actually do this thing where they turn into creatures that we can mutate onto. There's only a couple of them, again, outside of Gideon because he is a human. One of them is Sarcon, the Dragon Speaker, the 3 red, 4 loyalty planeswalker with the +1 ability of until end of turn, Sarcon, the Dragon Speaker, becomes a legendary 4/4 red dragon creature with flying, indestructible, and haste. He has a -3. That's he deals 4 damage to target creature, and a -6 is the ultimate here, where it says you get an emblem at the beginning of your draw step. You draw 2 additional cards, and at the beginning of your end step, you discard your hand. So again, don't worry about the ultimates. We're mostly about the pluses and occasionally about the minuses here.
Can I jump in for a sec?
Mm-hmm.
This reminder text on the card, which you didn't read out loud, and I don't blame you, confuses the issue. I mean, I know you worked it out with Judge Chat, but the reminder text on his +1 says he doesn't lose loyalty. He doesn't lose loyalty while he's not a planeswalker.
Right. And I think what this means is that it means like the loyalty counters on him, like they don't go away. Like the loyalty doesn't, and when he gets damaged, you don't remove loyalty from him. Right? Do you know what I mean?
Okay,
that's
but
what that
part
means.
of that sentence says when he's not a planeswalker. So that would imply that if I copy him, he's not a planeswalker.
True.
So my copies should be allowed
to
and this not have loyalty.
Again, this fully, this is what I thought as well. I thought you copy him. He's the you're right here. It says he's not a planeswalker, but
this is confusing.
It's because this ability is the thing that's stopping him from being a planeswalker. And when you copy this card, Sarcon the Dragon Speaker, that card doesn't have that ability affecting it, so it just comes in as a planeswalker. That's where that happens.
That feels better.
Yeah. So Sarcon is one of them. He's not the best one, but he's there. He's actually...
No, I imagine he's tough because you can only +1 the copies. So the +1ing those ones doesn't do a lot.
It doesn't do much, right? Exactly. Like what it turns him into a 4/4. He's basically already all time a 4/4. Yeah. You might be able to like occasionally do a -3 or do something with one of the Chandras. But anyways, next we have one that's slightly better. We have Oko the Trickster. Oko is from...
You don't see this one too often.
You certainly don't. This is from the Planeswalker decks. He's the 6-mana one. So this is, we can't get around it. We got to have this guy in here. He's one of 3 Planeswalkers that do this. 4 green, blue for the 4 loyalty Oko. +1, put 2 +1/+1 counters on up to 1 target creature you control. Okay, that's pretty good. Then 0, until end of turn, Oko becomes a copy of target creature you control. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to him this turn. So this is pretty good, even if we do have it mutated, because this mutated creature will still become a copy of whatever it is we're copying and still get this preventing damage ability. -7 is until end of turn, each creature you control has base power and toughness 10/10 and gains trample. Again, probably not going to happen. So Oko's a bit better. He's a little bit better of a target. Still not our best one, because here's our best one. Here's the one that really sends it home. I mentioned him earlier. Sarcon the Masterless, 3 red. It's the War of the Spark Sarcon, legendary planeswalker Sarcon. 5 loyalty is a static ability of whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, each dragon you control deals 1 damage to that creature. He has the +1 of until end of turn, each planeswalker you control becomes a 4/4 red dragon creature and gains flying. This is the key ability. He turns all of our planeswalkers into creatures. All of them become 4/4 creatures and they gain flying.
So that's how we make copies of other ones.
That's right, exactly. He is key to this deck. Absolutely linchpin key. -3, he also still has, and it's like create a 4/4 red dragon creature token with flying. So a lot of ways, a lot of a lot of the time, again, I was just goldfishing, so it's hard to tell. You don't know what board state's happening, blah, blah, blah. But a lot of the time I would play this card. I would assume that we would actually -3 him to get a little protection up to get that creature up. Obviously, that's still in itself a little risky also. But because if you can, you lay down Sarcon, you hit the +1, and then you mutate onto him as soon as possible. Now, that does leave him still very, very fragile. He's now a creature, which can just be killed with creature removal. But it's part of our step, and we just have to figure it out. We just have to get there.
I have a question.
Okay.
If I'm, I never like to poke a hole in things.
No.
I never like to do that. But if my hunch is right, I know that a lot of listeners are thinking this as well.
Yeah.
If a lot of our strategy comes from turning planeswalkers into creatures and then copying them, but we have to mutate on them to copy them.
Yeah.
Brudiclad will see the mutated ones as cards, not as tokens, because there's a card, a gem raiser on top of a token becomes a non-token.
That's true, yes. No, that's not what we're doing, though. We're going to turn these guys into creatures, so we'll put gem raiser right on top of the Sarcon here, and then we're going to use some cards to copy those guys. Yes.
Okay.
That's who those
are. There's the step I wasn't thinking of.
Yes. I mean, I don't even think I said it yet because it's...
You might have. It's a lot to keep track of.
A lot. Listen, this is a lot. This might be the most ambitious deck we've ever had. This is right up there with Happily Ever After, where we tried to win a 5-color, a card with a 5-color win condition while only legally allowed to use 3 colors in the deck. That one's maybe our most ambitious. This one's right up there. Honestly, This is tough. This is achievement unlocked territory we're exploring here.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are the 3. Those are the key ones. Again, they kind of get progressively better. Sarcon the Masterless is an absolute linchpin. We need him. We love him. We want him. He's great. Key because even when we have him as a creature, we can still keep using that +1 ability to turn more and more creatures or more and more planeswalkers into creatures. So that keeps going up. Okay, let's start talking about some of the neat moves though that are that we're going to be using. Sean, take this first pair here because I mean it's a classic, but think about it in terms of what we're doing in this deck.
Right. So one thing that Mutate brought us is Scute Swarm. 2 and a green for an insect. It's a 1/1 with landfall. Whenever a land enters, make a 1/1 green insect creature token. But if you've got 6 or more lands, you make a copy of Scute Swarm. That is an ability that this creature retains if it's been mutated above or below, doesn't matter. So we want to mutate onto Scute Swarm and then make copies of the full mutation stack. I guess you'd have to I don't know how you get a planeswalker on a Scute Swarm.
You can't get a planeswalker under the Scute Swarm or on top of the Scute Swarm or anything like that. But just the sheer number of tokens. I mean, anyone who's played against this card in Commander knows that this card gets absolutely out of control so quickly. So Scute Swarm just being able to
when Brudiclad kicks in, you've got 100 whatever.
Yeah,
I mean, it's at a certain point, isn't it just better to make them all the 2/1 mirror and swing to win?
Yeah,
that's probably
absolutely
a fine
absolutely
move.
It is. But with Brudiclad, we can both change our other tokens into the Scute Swarm copies, as well as as if we have a bunch of the Scute Swarms already, just turn them into the 2/1s, or you turn them into 4/4 dragons. Even that's enough too. It doesn't even need to be a copy of these planeswalker creatures.
I like it.
But yeah, read these next 2 and I'll explain what's happening with them.
Okay.
I didn't know about this until we started brewing on Discord.
Oath of Nissa. Single green. Legendary enchantment. When Oath of Nissa enters the battlefield, look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature, land, or planeswalker from among them. Put it in your hand. The rest go on the bottom in any order. And the other ability this enchantment brings is you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast planeswalker spells. A must include in a Super Friends deck, I would assume.
You have to.
An Oath of Jace, 2 and a blue, legendary enchantment. When it enters, draw 3 cards and discard 2. And at the beginning of your upkeep, scry X, where X is the number of planeswalkers you control. Okay. We'll be scrying a few, especially if we've got a Wait, but they won't be planeswalkers when we're copying the tokens.
Exactly.
But we'll still get a few of those basic ones,
Yeah.
which is just great.
Yeah, and there's a decent amount of time where you have one or two of these, like, honestly, fairly low power planeswalkers out doing fairly low power things. So hopefully you can work that political angle and kind of, have people understand that you're not you're not going to kill them with the planeswalkers, technically. Okay. Well, here's a great thing someone pointed out. It's that, and this is apparently this is a CEDH move, because apparently Sisay, Weatherlight Captain, is a big CEDH commander, which I did not know this.
It makes sense being able to tutor up legendaries.
Exactly. So being able to tutor up legendaries, the first thing that you go and get with Sisay is Oath of Nissa. They can go get this 1-drop legendary enchantment. It comes into play. Bam, you do a little like ponder or whatever this is, similar thing. Now and in this deck, now our planeswalker spells are all mana fixed, no problem. And then her loyalty is at 3. So then we go and get Oath of Jace next. And that not only gives us this draw 3 cards, discard 2. That's a nice little dig to try and find something good. But now we're scrying every upkeep where maybe we're scrying 1 or 2 if this is like earlier in the game or whatever, or we're scrying even more than that. Just 2 nice little utility cards here. You can include there's like, when it comes to the actual planeswalkers, you can include any of the ones you like, basically. There's a lot of cheaper planeswalkers these days running around. It's a lot of fun to play with the cheap planeswalkers. Most of them honestly make tokens, so like you can kind of pick. Same thing with these oaths. Throw in a couple oaths that you like. They almost all work in this deck. I chose these 2 only. I was playing around with the Teferi one, but it just didn't quite get there for me. But because you do want to do the abilities twice, you can still convince me that card is necessary in this deck. But this is the kind of fun. This is part of the fun of this deck is kind of being able to move around the pieces a little bit. Same thing with the mutate creatures. Put in the ones you like, man. Like, you can do whatever you like. Okay. Oath of Nissa, Oath of Jace. There we go. So now, well, Sean, you talked about the copies. What are we doing with this? How are we doing this? Well, we didn't want to just clone, because then we're not getting that Brudiclad bonus, right? We're not just going to play clones, although we could. No. That is one way to do it. But we want to make these as the choice, token copy that we have. So we've got an absolute Commander's Brew classic in here. We've got a spitting image for Simic hybrid for the sorcery. Create a token that's a copy of target creature with retrace. So yeah, this is good if it's in your graveyard or if it's in your hand. This one creates a token copy, which is all we need to do. There's also Stolen Identity, which is same price, sort of, same CMC essentially, for blue. It's a sorcery. Create a token that's a copy of target artifact or creature. And this one has Cypher, so we can throw it on one of those, one of those 4/4 flyers perhaps, or and get it in. And then we can, when it hits, you cast a copy of it essentially from exile. And then there's one more. I know, Sean, a favorite of yours is Sahili's Artistry for blue. Again, sorcery. Choose one or both. Create a token that's a copy of target artifact. Create a token that's a copy of target creature, except it's an artifact in addition. So you can do one or both of those things. Really, really great stuff. These are all 6 mana spells. That's tough for us. That is very tough. It makes it next to impossible to planeswalker plus mutate copy in the same turn. It makes it very, very difficult.
We're going to assume that the planeswalker activation is not the turn we've cast the planeswalker. So like maybe that's free mana wise. Maybe if we can survive around. But yeah, we're talking mutate and then copy.
So if we can mutate and copy. So if your planeswalker can survive or go around the table, then when it comes back to us, it is possible that we could, if we had the cheapest mutate, if we had the 2 mana one, that's still 8 mana. That's still a tall order to do in a commander game. So just be aware of that. That's tough. I have included a few other, I've included just like clone, like not just clone, but like some of the other cheaper versions of this that don't make tokens, just because you still want to be able to do this once in a while and not have it take up like an entire turn of the table. Because still getting those clones is still good. It just doesn't jive with Brudiclad quite as well. These ones are obviously the best choice for it, and this is what we want to do. I basically included all of these. We just had extra room for one or two more. All of this, right? Okay, so as I said earlier, there's some more neat moves here, just with planeswalkers with the loyalty abilities. It's nice to have a couple of the 0 abilities, right? Like that's where I think we're going to be able to get a lot of our value. So why don't you take these next 2 and read what they got to do, or next 3 actually? Sorry, we've read one of them already.
The other Ugen.
I did mean the other Ugen, yes, not this.
Right, the 6 mana Ugen.
Yeah.
Ugen the Ineffable. 6 mana Planeswalker, starts with 4 loyalties. Colorless spells you cast cost 2 less. Ugen starts with a +1. Basically, you're going to manifest the top card of your library. It's a 2/2 colorless spirit.
Sorry, they're not all zeros. Sorry, I was confused by my own sentence in the notes here. Basically, these are the best +1 and or 0 abilities that we have in the deck.
Yeah, the ones that you can use as copies right away.
Yes.
Yeah, so Ugen manifests a 2/2 colorless spirit. When it leaves the battlefield, you put the exiled card into your hand. -3, destroy any permanent that's 1 or more colors. Royal Scions, 1 blue-red. 5 loyalty to start. Their +1 is draw a card, then discard a card. That's going to loot. After you've made copies, after you've built them up, you can minus... Oh, no, there's 2 +1s. The other +1 is target creature gets +2/+0. First strike and trample. They could target themselves as a creature. And then the -8 is draw a bunch of cards, do a bunch of damage. Never going to happen.
Yeah, never going to happen. Don't even worry about it. This Royal Scions is good for 2 reasons. The 3 mana is really nice. And actually that +2 and gains first strike. If we do live the dream and we make a couple of copies of Royal Scions, I'm not even talking about Brudicladding and getting like 10 copies. I'm talking about just a few. You can make a pretty mean sized, mutated creature here with the +2 and the first strike and the trample. Like that basically says unblockable, right? Like it's going to be tough to block that. If you, a couple, even just like 2 or 3 of these activations makes a really big creature.
Yeah.
And we already read this guy,
and then, of course,
so we don't
the
need
Sarcon Unbroken, right? The one that adds mana and, draws you a card.
Draw a card. Yeah, very nice. And finally, you can read this one, too, because this one actually, I think, is a really nice ability. If we can get this one right.
Yeah. Chandra, Acolyte of Flame, 1 red, Legendary Chandra. 4 loyalty to start, 2 zeros. The first zeros put a loyalty counter on each red planeswalker you control. That's great if we got a lot of ones starting on 0. How many of them had red in them? A few of them.
Here's the burn on me, though. I was thinking the same way you are. But unfortunately, if they are creatures, they're not planeswalkers anymore.
Right.
So that's a bummer. So then I guess, but she is still good in the deck, though. She still does plus our planeswalkers while they are planeswalkers. So that's still actually pretty good.
And the other 0s make 2 1/1 red elemental creature tokens with haste. Sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step. And her -2 is probably not nothing. You may cast, so you can do one of these right away. She starts with 4, it's only -2. You may cast an instant or sorcery with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard this turn. If that card would be put into your graveyard, exile it instead. You gotta pay for it, so it costs you mana, but like in commander decks, I mean, I'm sure there's a cultivate in here. I don't mind casting that again.
Absolutely, that or one of the tutors that goes and gets the planeswalker. Like those are nice to have around. Yeah.
She's useful.
She's useful. Yeah, I agree. And I was bummed once I realized that the whole thing was about them not being planeswalkers. I was like, oh man, she would be so good.
I mean, you're gonna play this deck and like forget everything. Like you're gonna like this deck is like primed to make mistakes playing.
Like this one would really benefit from trying to play it on like Arena or something, because there you really know the rules. There are things, although it would probably work out that you would like do something. You're like, okay, animate it, okay, mutate, okay, do this, and then all of a sudden the creature would like disappear, and you'd like, what? Wait, what? Wait, what rule did I not know about that had to kill that right away? Like, what happened there, right?
My prediction for Brudiclad Bowl 2021 is across the field DQs for rules violations because no one can figure out how anything works.
I'm not kidding when I say it took like a week to figure out the rules on this, even with us asking judges.
Oh boy.
It took us like several several days. It was really funny.
Yeah.
Speaking of the Discord, there's a ton of people joining the Brudiclad Bowl who started the Brudiclad Bowl. I mean, we've got the people who help with this brew specifically. We had Pips Don't Like, our boy Guy Pizza, Neil Maxis, Dunking Dutchman, Sage, T Coates in there helping out, Dylan, Papa Dio, Braves for Robin, Chiefy always in there as well, Lol Watt also popping in, Doomfrog. Yeah, at Clockwork 12, everyone just in on the chat, basically in talking about anyone talking about Brudiclads deserves a little shine right now because it's a lot of fun. I mean, Senator Og, Nosrak 2, they're also in there. They weren't in on this brew, but they're in there talking about their Brudiclad decks right now, and it's a lot of fun. So yeah, I hope to stream and or at least record my game. Maybe even the other guys will record their games too. We can get them up somewhere and we can watch them. We will definitely let you know when that happens, if it happens. So keep an eye peeled for that. But let's we've talked about our wonderful Discord helpers, so I think it is time for the budget report. A bit of a tough budget report. Honestly, this might be the toughest one I've ever had to do because we are brewing this half for the show, half for this actual event, where budget was not an issue. I'll tell you, this is sort of a bit of a record-breaking deck here. The TCG mid for this deck was $3,627.
Oh, wow.
Don't worry, though. The low, we can get that down. Just want a couple beat-up cards. You don't worry about a few.
It's all from one alpha time twister.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. So the low actually is $3,281. So
look at that. If you buy beat-up versions, you saved $400 right away.
So, okay, obviously, no, we're not doing that's not the real. That's not what's happening. That is the version that I'm playing in the thing because, again, we're playing digitally. We're playing with proxies. We haven't decided yet, but it's going to be one of those two things. And for this deck to like try and do anything, the mana base just has to be there for me. You know what I mean? So I just like threw in the shocks, the fetches, the original duels. I just went nuts. I didn't bother worrying about that too much. But for the purposes of actually building this deck in real life, if I were going to actually do it, obviously I'd be sticking to the budget style that we all know and love. So when you get down to it and you cut some of the crazier, more expensive cards, this deck gets down very low because even though we're using a lot of planeswalkers, we're actually not using very many of the expensive ones. And I would cut I have like Ugen in here. I like the original Ugens. Like I would just cut that Ugen. It's like I said, there's tons of planeswalkers out there that don't cost that much. So this one runs around like 150, 130, and then
that's not terrible for a Super Friends.
Exactly. Super Friends decks are getting more and more affordable. Actually, the more planeswalkers they print, the less that whole planeswalker tax adds onto them. I've noticed, and our friend Alistair, who put together his Super Friends cheap Super Friends deck, basically is what he was calling it. Like, what was he calling it? Like OK Friends or something? Like,
OK Friends.
Yeah. He just picked the cheap planeswalkers that were like under $4-5. Put a deck together. You can do that easily with this. Just include those 3 key ones, which are none of them are expensive, and you're laughing. You're having a good time.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely there is an affordable version of this deck. Pricey cards, I would say just simply the land base. Again, you want this deck to work, so it's the land base just has to be there for you. You need to be able to cast that Sarcon the Masterless whenever you can. There might even be a few good protection spells, but honestly, you just got to get there. So yeah, it's really tough to point out specific things because luckily the things we need to work in the deck are not expensive. Mutate cards are cheap. Things that make token copies are cheap. Brudiclad's cheap. Even the planeswalkers we want to use, most of them are actually pretty cheap. There's a handful of ones that aren't, but The better, like this is one where the vegetables are what cost the most, and that's why that's why you see that $3,000 price tag. Ristic studies and things like that are all like peppered through this deck in the expensive version. So it's just the basics, because our deck is so crazy insane. All we needed to do is just try and stay on the rails a little bit during this. It was a blast to brew this. I will tell you how fun it is to play. I'm not entirely sure. I think it's going to be fun because we have such a narrow goal that like we're going to, we know what we're doing, and I think everyone's going to know too. What's your take on when you play decks like this? Like when you're going for an achievement unlock style deck, like how do you see it when you play it?
Like, how do I see it playing out?
Yeah, like when you sit down to a normal game of Commander versus when you sit down to a game where you're trying to do one thing.
Well, I'm going to be honest, I've got a very poor track record with pulling off achievements unlocked. They usually end up requiring a lot of hoops to jump through, and it is very rare that, I mean, you're looking at putting a board full of planeswalkers. That draws a lot of hate right away.
Yeah, no, I know.
And people don't let them stick around. So I don't know. Like, it seems, I love it, but I happily run achievement unlock decks, but I'm prepared to just spin some wheels for an evening.
That's the thing. And I think that if you do end up, I always try to build this into decks like this. I mean, if you've been listening to this show, you know that like we'll occasionally brew decks like this where we're trying to do something totally insane. Like, and is it even, like the question comes, is it even worth it? Like, what am I doing ultimately?
Yes.
I'm making a like 4/4 dragon that can give itself +2/+0 first strike and trample. I went through all that for this. That's what I did. Not sure if that's worth it. And the Brudiclad alone is like the better thing to try and do. But
you know what? Some people said, is it worth climbing Mount Everest? Like, what's the point? Some people said, what's the point?
Exactly.
But you know what happened to those people?
They died on the way
for
down.
100 years.
Yeah. They wasted their life trying to get to the top of a mountain for no reason. No, it's a monumental achievement and should be celebrated, as this should be too. And I think that this is this falls into the category of creating stories, right?
Yeah.
The most favorite thing to do in Commander is to be able to tell stories. I told one earlier in this podcast. The one about playing Brudiclad and making 1,000 sharding sphinxes. Let me tell you, there was a lot of sharding going on, and it was great. But that's the kind of story we want to try and create. So I want to try and create a story where I get 1 million Sarcons, or I somehow made 20 Ugen creatures that were actually, gem raisers or whatever. So yeah, have fun doing that. That's what I always try to do. I always just try to like play. You got to play kind of a political game of like, guys, if you want to attack me, that's fine. But listen, I'm just trying to do this one really dumb thing. And, if you think it's threatening you at any time, you go ahead and you kill me. But generally speaking, people will be like, okay, I want to see what you're doing. I want to see what this is, it's going to be fun in this event because we're all doing that. So I think that's why this deck might work a little better in this context. But hey, take it for a spin, try it out. Maybe you've got some better ideas. This is one thing. Like, I think there's a lot of people out there who like to do this sort of thing. And maybe you've got just a new take on it, a new spin, one that requires maybe one less step. Trust me, I thought about it. I couldn't think of it, but maybe you can. Let us know. Either way, hit us up on Twitter, hit us up in the comments. You know how it is. Other than that, though, that's going to be the episode for this week. So yeah, come on back. Next week, we're going to be looking at some Strixhaven cards. We might have a deck ready for you already. So that sounds good. Come on back. We'll see you then.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for watching. If you love what we're doing, consider supporting the show by going to patreon.com/commandersbrew.
And if you want to get any of the cards from our deck list, go to our TCG Player affiliate link below.
That helps us out too, and for a free way to help us out, consider sharing the show with some friends. Like and subscribe, add a comment or two.
See you later.
Bye.